The mall had been closed for hours, but the holiday loop kept playing through the empty halls, those bright, tinny jingles that sounded cheerful only when there were people around. Now they echoed like something trapped. Martin, the night guard on his last shift before the holidays, walked his usual route beneath flickering garlands. He tried humming along just to break the tension, but his voice felt swallowed by the quiet. The central pavilion looked different tonight. Maybe it was the way the colored lights reflected off the polished floor, or maybe it was the Santa chair, massive, velvet, gold-trimmed, sitting dead-centered like a throne waiting for judgment. No actors were scheduled, no photo crew. He'd watched them pack up 6 hours ago. But someone was sitting in the chair. A figure in a red suit, perfect posture, hands on the armrests, head tilted down like waiting for a child to climb onto his knee. Martin froze. His radio crackled with static, the kind that usually meant a cable was loose, but tonight it sounded intentional. "Sir," he called out, trying professional calm, "mall's closed. You need to—" The figure stood with a slow, deliberate motion. No jolly bounce, no friendly wobble, just a rise like a puppet lifted by a string. He didn't turn toward Martin. Instead, he walked away, steady, silent, straight into the unlit service corridor behind the photo backdrop. Martin hurried to the nearest security terminal. The monitors blinked awake. Corridor 3A, empty. Food court, empty. Toy zone, empty. But then, another Santa, standing by the escalators. Another by the food court. Another by the loading dock. All identical. All still. The same figure in red appearing in 3 places at once. Martin's breath fogged the monitor. His hands shook as he backed away from the screens. Back in the pavilion, something new lay on the floor by the abandoned photo set. A stack of thin, yellowed papers, children's wish lists written in looping crayon and fading pencil, decades old. Every single one ended the same way. He will take the one who stays after closing. Martin checked his watch. 4 hours until sunrise. 4 hours until the doors unlocked. 4 hours he somehow had to survive. The overhead lights buzzed in uneven pulses as Martin stepped back into the central walkway. The whole place felt off, like the mall itself was watching him. The garlands weren't just flickering, they were dimming in a rhythm, almost like they were breathing. He tried to ignore the thud of his heartbeat echoing against the tiled floor. He passed the first storefront, a clean glass wall reflecting the glow of fake snow machines. For a split second, he saw himself walking, except the reflection wasn't synced to his movement. His mirrored self lagged a step behind, spine stiff, face blank. When Martin stopped, the reflection didn't. It kept walking for 2 steps, then snapped back into place. He staggered away before he could look again. From further down the hall, he heard the jingle bells, soft, metallic, almost playful. Martin forced himself toward the sound, scanning corners, displays, the shadows beneath every plastic Christmas tree. All empty. Then he saw the red suit again. Not the figure himself, just the reflection of one. In the glass of a toy store window, a Santa stood behind Martin's reflection, not moving, not breathing, just watching. Martin whipped around. Nothing there. The hallway behind him was completely clear. He looked back at the window. Now the Santa reflection was closer. Its hand hung inches from the shoulder of his reflected self. Martin didn't wait. He bolted, sprinting past storefronts as the reflections kept warping, some showing him chased by the red figure, others showing 2 or 3 Santas stalking the aisles behind him. None of it matched reality. Or maybe reality was catching up. When he finally stopped, he found himself in the greeting card corridor. Ironically, the brightest spot in the mall. He leaned against a rack of holiday postcards, trying to catch his breath. That's when he noticed the cards. All the front-facing ones had changed. Instead of cheerful Santas or twinkling reindeer, every card showed a sketch of a mall hallway. His mall, his shift, his position. And in every hallway sketch stood a single red figure, drawn in smudged charcoal, facing the viewer. Martin reached for one card, but before he touched it, a low metallic clatter echoed behind him. He turned. At the end of the corridor, the Santa figure from before stood perfectly still. Same posture, same tilt of the head. But now it was facing him. And this time, when Martin blinked, it didn't disappear.
Martin didn't breathe. Couldn't. The Santa figure stood at the end of the greeting card aisle, hands limp at its sides, the suit too still, too heavy, like something wearing a human shape rather than fitting inside it. The head tilted slightly, the way mannequins sometimes slant when they're not anchored right. But nothing about this felt plastic. Martin took one slow step back. The figure copied it. Not mirrored, copied. Same leg, same pace, same tiny shuffle of hesitation. "Stop," Martin whispered, before he could stop himself. The figure froze. Not a sound, not a sway, not a hint of breathing. Martin edged toward the nearest service exit, the door with the peeling green exit sticker he'd opened 1,000 times on fire drills. He kept his eyes locked on the red suit. The figure stayed frozen, halfway down the corridor, head still bent at that slight, questioning angle. He reached the exit door, pushed. The door swung open and revealed another hallway. Not the concrete service tunnel he expected, not the storage rooms, not even the loading dock. This hall was carpeted, fully decorated, lined with holiday posters from decades past, faded Santas winking beneath slogans like, "He sees you," and "Stay after hours for a miracle show." He'd never seen this hallway before. He stepped back, but the original corridor behind him had changed too. The Santa figure was gone, vanished again, or worse, already somewhere else. The jingles started up, fast, warped, as if someone had spun the track backward and forced it through blown speakers. The sound came from the new hallway, from deep inside it. Martin's instinct screamed to go the other way, but then the lights behind him shut off, one row at a time. Click, click, click. Darkness crawled toward him like a living thing. He had 2 choices: step into the impossible hallway, or let the dark swallow him. Martin shoved himself through the doorway and slammed it behind him. The warped jingle continued, echoing down the long carpeted passage. The posters on the walls seemed to shift under the flicker of the lights. The smiling Santas looked older, their faces stretched by time. Some posters had been torn, exposing yellowed paper beneath. Halfway down, something lay on the floor.
A Polaroid photo. Martin lifted it. A blurry shot of the mall pavilion. Tonight. From above. And in the center, sitting on the Santa chair, was Martin. Except the version in the photo was looking directly at the camera. His stomach dropped. A soft, rhythmic tapping sound rose from deeper in the corridor. Tap, tap, tap. Slow footsteps. Something was coming. Something that moved with the weight of a man, or the shape of one.
The tapping grew steadier as Martin backed deeper into the strange corridor, Polaroid still clutched in his shaking hand. Each step of the unseen thing sounded measured, too even, too deliberate, like it was counting the distance between them. The carpet muffled Martin's footsteps, but did nothing to soften the sound of the thing approaching. He forced himself to move, eyes darting from wall to wall. The decorations felt wrong the longer he looked. The posters weren't just faded, they were aged, edges browned and curling like they'd hung here for 50 years. Some were dated with old mall logos he didn't recognize. Others had handwritten notes on the bottom. He takes whoever lingers. Do not be the last. If he walks, run. Martin swallowed hard. The tapping grew louder. He passed a glass display case filled with outdated merchandise, retro toys, old cookie tins, Santa dolls with porcelain faces. One of the dolls had toppled forward, chin pressed to the glass, eyes staring right at him. He didn't remember seeing it like that a second ago. Tap, tap, tap. The thing had turned the corner. Martin reached another door, identical to the one he'd come through. He grabbed the handle, pulled, locked. The tapping grew closer, echoing all around him now, bouncing off the narrow walls like multiple things walking at once. Martin pressed his ear to the door, hoping, praying for any alternative, and froze. Someone was breathing on the other side. Soft, slow, steady. Not panicked, not human, just waiting. He stepped back. The Polaroid slipped from his hand and fluttered to the floor. Before it landed, a cold gust blew through the corridor. Impossible, because no vents were visible. The air smelled like pine and electric static. Then the lights above him flared, every bulb buzzing to life at once. The thing stood at the far end of the hallway. Its Santa suit was too bright, too clean. The beard hung stiff like cotton dipped in glue. The face beneath was shadowed, features hidden except for two faint glinting points. Eyes reflecting the light, but not catching it like a person's would. More like polished stone. It didn't move at first. Then its head jerked upward, snapping into place as if pulled by an invisible wire. Martin backed away on instinct, but the Santa began matching his pace, footsteps now perfectly silent, the tapping replaced by a smooth gliding sound as it advanced. He reached for the walls. No doors, no alcoves, no closets. Nowhere to hide. He nearly tripped over something small on the floor. Another photo, then another. Dozens, scattered like breadcrumbs. Each one was a Polaroid of people, Guards, janitors, mall employees, sitting in the Santa chair, some smiling, some terrified, some blurred mid-run, as if the photographer hadn't let them get away. At the bottom of every photo was the same handwritten line. This one stayed after closing. He looked up. The Santa figure was less than 10 steps away, and its arm, slowly, stiffly, was rising, pointing directly at him.
Martin stumbled backward until his shoulders hit the wall. The Santa figure still pointed at him, unmoving, the gloved finger rigid like the hand of a broken clock. The air in the corridor felt charged, humming with a low frequency that made his teeth ache. He forced himself to look away from the approaching shape and instead scanned the floor. More Polaroids, more faces. Some he'd recognized, guards he'd replaced years ago, a manager who'd vanished from payroll without explanation, even a janitor who'd supposedly retired early. All posed in the Santa chair, all marked with the same damning line. This one stayed after closing. Martin kicked the photos aside and started running, not toward the exit door, not toward the Santa figure, but toward the only part of the corridor he hadn't examined, a slight bend where the carpet looked newer, as if someone had hastily patched the floor. The Santa didn't chase him at first. It simply turned its head in stiff increments, watching him flee. But the moment Martin rounded the bend, he heard the soft gliding behind him. Smooth, fast, too fast. He sprinted. The hallway narrowed. The walls around him shifted from festive posters to plain white drywall, then to concrete, as though he were outrunning decades of mall renovations in reverse. Dust coated the air. The lights flickered with the strain of a building dredging up its own forgotten past. A metal door appeared ahead, an old fire exit, rusted, paint peeling in sheets, the kind that no mall ever kept functional but never bothered to replace. Martin slammed into it with his full weight. The door groaned open. He stumbled into a dim, cavernous room that smelled of mildew and cold cement. Rows of storage crates stretched into the shadows, stacked like a forgotten archive. Old signage, broken mannequins, plastic snowflakes the size of car tires. A graveyard of discarded holidays. Behind him, the Santa figure reached the doorway. It didn't step through. Instead, it lifted one hand and pressed its palm against the frame. The metal hissed under the touch, frost spreading from the glove in thin crystalline branches, like ice forming on a window. Martin ducked behind a towering crate. The room was silent, except for the faint crackle of freezing metal. Then, tap. Not footsteps, finger tapping. The Santa was tracing something on the doorframe. Martin dared a glance. It was drawing letters in the frost, each stroke deliberate and slow. M. A. R. T. I. N. His name, written backward, like the thing had never learned the right orientation of human words. His breath hitched. His hiding place suddenly felt too small, too exposed. When the topping stopped, silence fell again. Heavy silence. Waiting silence. Then the Santa figure stepped into the storage room. Not walking, not gliding, simply appearing 3 feet inside, as if the space between had been skipped, erased from existence.
It turned its head, scanning the crates with a jerky motion that sent shivers up Martin's spine. He pressed himself tighter against the crate, hardly daring to inhale. The Santa paused, listening. Then, in the softest voice imaginable, scratchy, unused, like old tape warped by time, it spoke, "Found you." The word, "found you," hung in the air like frost, thin and sharp enough to cut. Martin clamped a hand over his mouth, afraid even the sound of breathing would give him away. The Santa figure stood motionless between the crates, head tilted, as if savoring the silence. Then it spoke again, but the voice had changed. "Hey, man, you doing your rounds?" It was Danny's voice. Danny, the guard who worked the morning shift. Danny, who had gone missing last December. Martin's stomach dropped. The thing repeated the line, this time with a hitch, like someone mimicking speech they didn't fully understand. "Hey, man, you doing your rounds?" Footsteps, real ones, echoed closer, heavy, slow. The Santa figure was trying to sound human. Martin squeezed his eyes shut. He'd seen animals do this in videos, mimicry without comprehension. But this wasn't an animal. This was something that wore voices like masks. A soft scraping sound glided along the floor. The hem of the red coat brushed past his hiding spot. The figure paused. Then, in a third voice, higher, trembling, unmistakably a child's, it whispered, "Don't stay after closing." Martins felt the blood drain from his face. That voice, he'd heard it before, one of the old wish list notes, one of the kids whose paper had turned yellow with time. The figure moved on, drifting deeper into the maze of crates. Only when the gliding faded did Martin dare move. He slid out from behind the crate, legs weak, lungs burning from held breath. He had to get out. He had to reach the control room. He had to survive until sunrise. Behind him, faint and distant, the warped jingle started again. And just before it looped, a new voice, his own, whispered from the shadows. "Martin, this way." Martin froze mid-step. Hearing the creature imitate Danny was one thing. Hearing it imitate a child was worse. But hearing his own voice echo from the dark, that snapped something deep inside him. The voice came from the far end of the storage room, drifting between stacks of dusty crates. It wasn't just similar, it was exact. Same tone, same breathy rasp he only got when he was terrified. "Martin, come on, this way." It even sounded impatient, like he was arguing with himself. "No," he whispered, backing away. His voice shook. The echo didn't. The fake Martin repeated, louder this time. "This way." A metal shelf rattled as something moved behind it. The figure didn't hide its presence anymore. It wanted him to follow. It expected him to. Martin scanned the room for any escape path, ventilation grates, maintenance doors, anything. But the storage space felt different now, rearranged somehow. Crates he swore weren't there before formed a narrowing path leading toward the voice. The place was reshaping itself around him. He took a single step backward. Instantly, the jingle track cut off mid-note, like scissors slicing through tape. Silence rushed in. Then a new sound rose, soft, dragging, rhythmic, fabric on concrete, like a heavy suit sliding step by step.
Martin turned the other way and ran. His own voice called after him, suddenly desperate. "Martin, stop!" He didn't. He sprinted blindly between crates, the air growing colder with every step. His breath turned white, his fingers numbed. Behind him, something began to laugh. Not loud, not human. A brittle, hollow chuckle, like bells rusting from the inside. Martin didn't dare look back. He only knew one thing now. If he kept following any voice but his own thoughts, he wouldn't make it to sunrise. Martin tore through the maze of crates until the cold thinned out and the air tasted like dust again instead of snow. He slowed, heart hammering, every muscle buzzing with adrenaline. The laughter had faded, replaced by the faint hum of old lights overhead. He'd reached another section of storage, smaller, tighter, claustrophobic. Boxes stacked all the way to the ceiling, narrow aisles, no clear exits. Great, a dead end disguised as a hallway. He pressed his back to a crate and tried to steady his breathing. That's when he noticed the box beside him wasn't taped shut. The flaps hung loosely, swaying with each pulse of cold air. Something inside shifted. Martin flinched back, then forced himself to look. Inside were Polaroids. Hundreds, maybe thousands, all stacked in uneven piles, some crisp, some yellowing, some so freshly developed the edges still curled outward. He picked up a photo near the top. It was him, taken minutes ago in the corridor he'd just escaped, standing beside the patched section of carpet. He dropped it. His hands trembled so badly the next photo slipped between his fingers. Another image. Another angle. A shot of him sprinting between shelves, taken from somewhere above him, like the air ducts or rafters. He grabbed a handful and flipped through them. Every photo in the box was of him. Some moments hadn't even happened yet. In one, he was standing in a place he didn't recognize, an atrium filled with broken ornaments. In another, he was lying on the floor, face turned away. In a third, the Santa figure stood behind him, one gloved hand resting on his shoulder. Martin's stomach turned. A whisper drifted through the stacks, not mocking this time, not stolen from the voice it had heard. A new voice, soft, low, almost excited. Almost time. Martin backed away from the crate, Polaroids scattering around his feet. He didn't know how the creature captured the images, or when, or from where. But one truth hit him like a punch to the chest. It wasn't hunting him. It was documenting him, recording every step. Maybe it always had. Martin stumbled backward from the spilling Polaroids, his pulse thudding in his ears. The air around him felt thicker now, like the walls were exhaling warm dust, while the cold crept only from one direction. Behind him. Always behind him. He didn't dare turn around. Instead, he edged sideways through the narrow aisle, shoes crunching on stray photos. Something about stepping on them made him nauseous. It felt like stepping through his own future. He reached the next row of crates and stopped dead. A clock sat on top of the stack, an old mall wall clock with a cracked face. It must have been pulled from storage decades ago. Its second hand twitched, stuttering in broken loops. 3:17 a.m. Way too early. But when Martin checked his wristwatch, 3:46 a.m. 30 minutes gone. Vanished. No, 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 he whispered. twisting the watch, tapping it as if the time could knock itself back into place. The clock on the crates twitched again. 3:18, 3:19. The minutes were moving faster now, skipping in uneven jumps like the building was rushing toward an ending. A soft thump echoed through the room. Then another. But these weren't footsteps or gliding movements. These were drops. Light, faint, rhythmic, like something tapping the ceiling from above. Martin slowly tilted his head up. The ceiling panels bulged downward, as if something heavy crawled across them on all fours. Shadows shifted between the rows of lights. He caught glimpses of red fabric, a white glove, a face he couldn't fully see, only the curve of a cheek and the hollow dark where an eye should have been. The creature was above him now, moving in slow, deliberate crawls. As it passed overhead, more Polaroids rained down through the gaps in the panels, fluttering like snowflakes, landing all around him. Some struck his shoulders, his hair, his arms. Martin grabbed one without meaning to. This photo wasn't like the others. No blurred motion, no distant angle. It was a close-up, his face, inches from the camera, eyes wide, mouth open mid-breath. But the detail that froze him wasn't the image. It was the timestamp. 4 a.m. 17 minutes from now. And in the reflection of his own eyes, a red sleeve, a white glove, and a hand reaching toward him from behind. Martin dropped the photo. The ceiling above him creaked. Very softly, right by his ear, a whisper trickled through the tiles. Soon. The ceiling groaned again, slow, straining, as if the weight above it was no longer content to crawl. Martin backed into the narrowest file he could find, shoulders brushing cold cardboard. His watch ticked in panicked little beats. 3:53 a.m. 7 minutes until the timestamp in the photo. 7 minutes until whatever it had planned. He glanced at the Polaroid on the floor, the one showing the gloved hand reaching for him. Then he noticed something strange. The background behind him in the photo wasn't the storage room. It wasn't any hallway he'd been in. It was the mall atrium, the exact center of the building, right where the Santa chair stood. A chill ran through him. The creature didn't want him lost. It wanted him brought back, straight to where it first appeared. A new sound cut through the air, a clean, heavy thud, like boots landing on solid ground. The ceiling tiles above him bowed inward under sudden pressure. No time left. Martin shoved through a row of crates, sending Polaroids pouring like snowfall, and sprinted for the only thing that made sense, the atrium. He burst through a service door and froze. The Santa chair was waiting. Not aged, not dusty. Perfect, fresh, lit from above as if the mall itself were holding a spotlight. The jingle track crackled on overhead, but this time no glitches, no backward distortion, just the original cheerful tune. Martin turned to run. Too late. The Santa figure stood behind him, close enough to touch. Its gloved hand lifted, slow, inevitable, and rested on his shoulder, exactly as in the Polaroid. Martin's breath hitched. The creature leaned beside him, face still hidden beneath the red hood and false beard. When it spoke, its voice wasn't stolen this time. It wasn't a child's voice, or Danny's, or his own echo. It was human, old, tired, regretful. "Please," it whispered. "Sit." Martin didn't move. The figure stepped back, its heavy suit sagging as if the shape inside it slumped with exhaustion. Then it said something that froze every thought in Martin's mind. "You're the first one who ran. The rest always waited." Martin stared. "What do you want?" The creature's shoulders sank. "I want to stop." It reached up, fingers trembling, and removed the red hood. The face beneath wasn't monstrous. It was a man, a security guard's uniform under the suit, badge old and rusted, name faded. A guard who had vanished decades ago, the first one who ever stayed after closing. "I tried to warn them," he whispered. "I wrote the notes, I left the photos, but the mall, it doesn't let us leave." Martin felt cold to his core. "Why me?" The man gave a fragile, broken smile. "Because you ran. You gave it a different ending. Now one of us finally gets to go home." Martin shook his head. "No, take me too. We both go." The man stepped back, gaze softening in something like gratitude. "You can't save me, but you saved yourself." The lights dimmed, the jingle warped, the air pressure shifted, heavy, hungry. "It's coming," the man whispered. "Sit in the chair. It needs someone, but not you, not tonight." Martin's throat tightened. "Who then?" The man's eyes grew distant. "The next guard." A sound like 1,000 Polaroids fluttering at once filled the atrium. The man, the Santa, the trapped guard began to fade, body shredding into drifting scraps of red fabric and old paper wishes, scattering like snow. His final words came from everywhere at once. "Tell them not to stay after closing." Then he was gone. And when dawn finally broke, security found Martin in the atrium, alive, shaking, staring at the empty Santa chair. On the velvet seat lay a fresh Polaroid, not of him, of a new face, a guard he'd never met. Under it, the familiar line, "He will take the one who stays after closing."